Hi, this is PatZi with a Z. Welcome to Joy on Paper Live, a program for writers and those who dream of writing, and for everyone who wants to know the story behind the book, or behind the film, or behind the script, because today I have a wonderful guest, a legendary guest. His book he is synonymous with the art of cinematic storytelling, and I am so happy to welcome back to Joy on Paper Richard Walter, because he was here. We talked before about his recent book, Deadpan. And now today we are going to be talking about a book that I have had for as long as it was written. I dug it out. Here it is. This is the original version, which came out a long time ago.
1988.
Yeah, 88. And just as I was started to work on scripts and in Hollywood, and this book I have taken this book all over the world. It's really been used because I did have 3 of my spec scripts optioned, and I wrote scripts for 2 books. Now they are all in turnaround. And that doesn't mean anything because they could be turning around and then one day suddenly somebody will say, oh my goodness, because my movies are really, they're timeless in the point of fact. All movies are timeless because you never know. You can do a movie that I meant to write in the 80s. Somebody will want to see it today.
If people complain about rejection, writers complain, and if you can't handle rejection, do not do this. But the beautiful thing is, and not enough people pay attention to this, that you just need one person. Doesn't matter how many people reject it, how many studios, how many publishers, you just need one to take you on, and then you're home free.
Exactly. And I made money. I got options on 3 specs, and one was re-opt, which was more money, which is nice. And Clive Cussler once told me, Clive Cussler used to come on the program, and he's a lovely guy. And he said, on some of my books, they optioned it so many times that I made much more money from the options than I ever did from the sale of the books. So
right.
He was in a good position.
It's renting the rights. Instead of selling the rights, you rent the rights.
Yeah, and then point of fact, the scriptwriter does not make a lot of money if the film is made. Somehow this Hollywood bookkeeping manages to make sure that there's never much left to give out to the scriptwriter.
The real creative writing, as it's sometimes said, that goes on in Hollywood is in the accounting offices. But that said, was 40 years of teaching screenwriting at UCLA, and I've got former students who are well-established writers getting millions of dollars. I noticed the new Steven Spielberg picture is written by David Koepp, who blurbs my book, and I promise you, David is getting millions of dollars.
Yeah, they did get wide. There was a period where writers weren't, I think, as pushy, but today a good writer really does not let him or herself be cheated. You can really make good money nowadays. And of course, you move into other things too. Yes, definitely. It happens. But when we're talking about you are, when I said you're legendary, really, you're the kind of, your name, Richard Walter, you could go in Hollywood, you could go to just a simple restaurant on the corner or a bar, or you could just talk to a waiter and say, Richard Walter, and they would know your name because they do, because they all want to write a movie. Everybody. I was once in just a little cafe, a coffee shop, and I was talking to people, and this was like years after I had been in Hollywood. And I was back there, we were there for business, and I was in just a cup. And I started talking to them about, what are you doing? Because I could tell they were all good looking people. What have you played? What have you been in? They've been in bit parts, they've been in a thing. And every single one of them was writing on a script. Everyone.
The opening sentence to one of my books, there are 3 of them, the screenwriting books, is there anyone anywhere who's not writing a screenplay? And if they're not writing a screenplay, the only possible excuse is they're writing a book about how to write screenplays, because there are quite a few of those, and I am guilty of providing 3. But I got into a cab once, was returning to LA, And just for a joke, because I like to clown around, I said to the drivers, "How's the script coming along?" And he turned back. I thought he was going to crash off the freeway. He turns right around. He goes, "How did you know?" There's just nobody not writing a screenplay. And remember, everybody who is experienced, connected, once was completely unknown and just starting out. So if you're a first timer, you're in very good company.
Exactly. You never know. You never know. It could happen. So definitely it's something that people are interested in. And you, of course, you're the master of it. You were teaching at
Oh, well,
UCLA
thank you.
and
Thank
you were,
you.
no, everybody knows that there's nobody better than you.
Bless
You
your
can
heart.
just you can tell us a little bit about the people, but first I love the new opening where you're writing about how the opening to the new version, the updated version, about being going on strike. About I love how you talk about coming to Hollywood and you're fresh and well and things when you're like when you first go to Hollywood and it is the weather, the trees, the sitting outside, all of that. Of course, it's like that. It was like that in the '80s. I don't know today, but definitely. What year did you come to Hollywood?
I came to California in 1966. I thought I would stay for a few weeks and get back to graduate school back east. But instead, I fell into film school at USC. And here we are. I'm going to give it another 59 years. And if it still hasn't worked out for me, back to the apple. At
Ah,
USC, my it was the right time, the right place. My classmates, they call it the Lucas era. George was a classmate. I'm told that George calls it the Walter era. Just joking. But there were beyond George. There were. I like to say that this is the first class to really go on from film school, from the academic community, to come and own Hollywood, except for George, who owns Marin County up in Northern California. But it's amazing, just amazing how many writers and other film artists, directors, the cinematographers, the composers, of scorers of film music and so on. Quite amazing. And I just never really looked back. My bride and I realized at one time, returning from a vacation, we said, "Oh, it's great to be. That was a great vacation, but it's great to get home." And then we thought, "Home is it?" we kind of realized that this was our home, and there's no better place to grow up. As I've said before, before we got on the air, before we started recording, I said the only thing I don't like about LA is the relentless good weather. It's not good writing weather. I think that's why the Irish are such good writers. They have wonderful writing weather there.
that's true. And the funny thing is, one of the things, of course, is you can just draw the curtains, and so many places will have fireplaces. I was surprised to find fireplaces in places in Hollywood, and you just get to work, and that's one of the things that people don't realize how very hard writers work. Yes, you have all the sunshine. Yes, you do all of the other stuff, but when you actually knuckle down and start working, wow, it's hard and it's a lot of work. And
It, yeah, no, it's how hard is it? Here's how hard it is. It's the hardest thing in the world. Now that might sound crazy, but it's like, for example, here in my house, the mailman just delivered the mail today, and he's got to go up and down the streets and up and down stairs, and not just my block, the whole neighborhood, his whole route. And I'm just sitting at my desk. I have a beautiful view of the Silver Lake Reservoir and the snow-capped mountains, the San Gabriel Mountains. And I'm just sitting and working with my brain, trying to market my fantasies and my imagination. That sounds a lot easier than what the mailman is doing. But I would ask the mailman or anybody else to try to write, not to even succeed at it, but simply try, and not for 8 hours a day, but just for 3 or 4 hours a day, to sit and try to dream up things and write them down, think them up and write them down, and write them down in such a way. If it's merely a movie, it's a couple of hours. If it's even a short novel, my new novel, Deadpan, is about 250 pages. I'm a slow reader. It take me 10, 15, 20 hours to read that. And I'm asking, every writer is asking everybody to not just pay attention for that amount of time, a couple of hours or days and weeks, but to pay money for the privilege of doing that. And that is a tall order up. Again, they don't have to succeed at it. You just have to sit here and try that, and you'll be screaming for the permission to deliver mail. You realize how easy it is to deliver mail. It's no accident that they call it a work of art.
Yeah, no, absolutely true. And that's what I tell people, because a lot of people don't realize it. And I want them to appreciate the work that goes into it. Now, the work that has gone into essentials of screenwriting, and this is wonderful. Essential of screenwriting, the art, craft, and business of film and television writing. So you cover a lot of things in here, which is very important because it is a business, it is hard work, but there's so much that you have to learn too. And so let's talk about some of the essentials in this book. And maybe we'll start. I love the first chapter, 7 naughty words. And people are going to say, oh, okay, what's that?
Yeah, don't you remember all of them? Audience, entertainment, commerce, business, especially entertainment. Just as an example, Cubby Broccoli, Albert Broccoli, deceased now, he produced the original James Bond films. And every time a new James Bond movie was released, he would give an interview and he'd always say the same thing. He would almost apologetically say, "Now look, we know what we're doing here. We're not doing Macbeth. We're just trying to be entertaining. We're not doing Macbeth, just trying to entertain." And I wanted to ask him, or I wanted some reporter to ask him, "What have you ever seen Macbeth? Do you have any idea how entertaining it is?" It starts with witches and riddles and bloodlust, and it's a nail biter. There is a hoax that you can either make a personal, meaningful film or just an entertaining film. And it is, as I say, it's a hoax. The really great movies do both of those things. That's the job of the ultimate job of the writer.
Yeah. And of course, the essential part of writing a screenplay, you are you have a lot of things to think about in addition to what a normal writer does when you're just writing a novel. When you're writing a novel, you are really concentrating on the character. You might stop to think, how is the reader going to react to it? But a screenwriter has so many things in order to make a script something that has value, that somebody can use, somebody will pay for. And it is a completely different thing because in essence, when you're taking, I took 2 books and wrote scripts for them. But when you're doing your spec scripts, you have always, you're sort of in the back of your mind, the location, how much is it going to cost, how many characters, how many actors. So you have all of this too to make it viable.
Yes, it's actually very easy to know and to understand what you have to do. There's really just 2 things, and I'll tell you what they are, and you know what they are because you've read the book. And I'm talking now about screenplays in particular.
Yeah.
And you got to remember, first of all, the screenplay is just an elaborate list of 2 and only 2 kinds of information, and those 2 are what we see and what you hear, sight and sound. The sight is what the characters do, the actions that they take. The sound, there's a lot of sound in a movie. From the point of view of the writer, though, it's almost all of the sound is the dialogue that she writes. So that's it. It's sight and sound. Art is about making choices. And you gotta, how do you make those choices? And here's how you make them. You can have any sight or any sound. I call this integrating the movie. The integrated screenplay is just sight and sound, and every single sight, that is to say, every action that the characters take, and everything they say, get ready now, here it is, moves the story forward. It's just as simple as that. And people say, "Hey, Richie, it's so simple. Why doesn't everybody do it?" I didn't say it's easy to do. You heard me earlier. I said it's the hardest thing in the world to do, but it's easy to understand what you have to do. I'm not much of a sports fan. We are enjoying the Olympics. We're recording this during the Winter Olympics, but the I know how to hit a home run. I understand what you have to do. I just can't do it. So That's what separates the people from the children. People understand that to do it requires all sorts of stuff, but first of all, time. It takes a bunch of time to do this. And it also requires. I was talking to an old friend of mine years ago, now deceased, Sid Field, who wrote some books on this subject. I remember saying to him that the maturing as a writer means not just learning to throw away, but learning to love to throw away. There's a letter from Hemingway to Fitzgerald in which he says, "Every day I write one glorious, timeless, ingenious, eternal, poetic, beautiful sentence, and 999 jerky, stupid, dumb sentences. And the deal is you just got to throw that stuff away." And I'm going to tell you again, if you can palpably, measurably say how it moves the story forward, you're home free. That's all that's required. You can do anything. You can have the characters do anything at all. You can even have them do nothing at all if somehow that moves the story forward. How could that move the story forward? I think I have a blurb on the book from Dave from oh, who is it? One of my commandos from UCLA. And again, the trick that they've had to learn. Oh, actually, I'm thinking of Alexander Payne, who was a student of mine years and years ago. And my favorite movie that Alexander made is About Schmidt. It stars Jack Nicholson. And the opening to About Schmidt, it's a brilliant film. It's Nicholson's best work. And in the opening, it's just a guy, it's Schmidt, Jack Nicholson is Schmidt, sitting in his office in some building in Nebraska and just sitting there saying nothing. The only noise, the only motion is the ticking and the ticking off and the turning of the sweep second hand of the clock. It's about 40 seconds before 5 o'clock, and he just sits there. And while he's sitting there, we look around the office and we see that all the graphics are off the wall. We see that the shelves are all cleared and emptied, that the desk is clear. And then in the corner of the office, there's stacked up boxes that obviously contain this stuff. And you can see, without a word of description, just see that this man is about to retire. And then suddenly the clock, not suddenly, but eventually, the clock hits 5 o'clock and he gets up and he leaves. And that's the whole scene. We've learned so much about that guy, that he's retiring, that he's punctual and a stickler for detail. Or maybe we wonder, why didn't he leave sooner? Maybe, like a lot of people in their jobs that they don't love, I'm not sure of that I know anybody who set out to be in the insurance industry. But anybody who set out to do something worthy is going to have to deal with if they're a writer, they're going to have to deal with making it worthwhile to the people who are looking. And that is really the test. Now, you might say that Nicholson, as Schmidt, was planning, like some people do, to do something else when he's retired. Maybe take on, I don't know, maybe even write. But now suddenly he's facing it. And it's one thing to think about it, another thing to actually be there and see whether or not you do it. Are you just thinking about it? Are you going to do it? So we could wonder about that. And that we wonder about it is not the testimony to Alexander Payne, the writer's weakness, but his strength, that he makes us wonder about things. I'll give you another example, a quick example of integration. I'm a big opponent of scenes in restaurants. I will also tell you, talking on the phone, everything I see now is, hang on just a second. Yes, what's that? Oh, it's the coroner's office. He did. It's, they even show you now the text. You go to the movies and you're watching texts on the
Yeah, I
screen.
hate that.
But I hate scenes in restaurants. And if you're having a scene in a restaurant, for God's sakes, you don't have to have the people order the food. Nevertheless, one of my favorite movies is Moonstruck. It won the Oscar best screenplay and best movie, I think, I don't know, 25 or 30 years ago. John Patrick Shanley, the writer. And I will say parenthetically, I'm very unimpressed with a lot of movies that are nominated and win Oscars. But in Moonstruck, it opens in a restaurant with Danny Aiello and Cher. They're having a date, and the waiter comes over, and he recommends the bluefish, this fresh bluefish. We have a special plucked out of the bay today. So Danny Aiello says, "Okay, I'll have that." And Cher says to him, her character is Loretta. She says, "You're going to have fish?" He says, "Why not fish?" She says, "You're about to go to Italy. You're flying off to Parma to see about your mother who's maybe dying, and you're going to be all night on that plane with fish in your belly. You'll get nauseous. You get sick. You'll glow blue and green. You don't want." He says, "What do I want? You want a light pasta primavera." She tells him exactly what so he tells the waiter, "Okay, get that." And as the waiter goes off, he says to Cher, "You're the kind of woman that a man needs. You know how to take care of a woman. Marry me." She says, "You call that a proposal of for marriage?" He says, "What do you want me to do? Get down on my knees?" She says, "Yeah, what about get down on you?" So he gets that. So something's happening. This guy is on his knees in a restaurant proposing to the person at the table. So something's happening. But that's not all of it. Imagine, what does that tell us about this character? Cher, in that character, Loretta, is somebody who knows that love is bull, it's bunk. She's seen the dreadful, wretched, awful relationship that her parents have. And she knows there's no such thing as love and passion. It's all bunk. And that's a very different Cher from the Cher at the end of the movie, very different Loretta. At the end of the movie, she realized that love is not just important, it's the only thing there is. And she's not talking about rainbows and angels and flowers. She's talking about erotic, passionate, physical driven, exciting sex, very different character. So you can see how the sitting in the restaurant and ordering the food is very much a part of that story. There's an answer to the question, how does that move the story forward? So you can do anything at all as long as it's integrated. And the reason people fail is not because they don't have the talent, but they don't have the discipline. Here's discipline: the time that it takes to figure that all out, to try stuff out, see that it doesn't work, throw it away. You can't figure it out intellectually in advance. You got to put it down and see how it works, if it works at all. And it's never finished. Never finished. Art is never finished. It's just abandoned. I had the privilege years ago of meeting Julius Epstein. He wrote Casablanca, for God's sake. And I said to him, "Wow, I'm so excited to meet you. All I or any of my film phony pals ever hoped for once in a life is we should touch something eternal and timeless like you did with Casablanca. And wouldn't it be nice if I could tell you that?" He said, "Oh, thanks. That's very kind of you. Appreciate it." No, he's a writer. He said, Casablanca's Casablanca. They screwed that up in the part where blah, 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 blah. And then Claude Rains is supposed to say, but then they thought that here he is kvetching about how they ruined his picture. What picture? Casablanca. And all I could think to myself was, boy, I just wish somebody would ruin my movie like they ruined Casablanca. So you gotta, I think the truest thing said in the last century was by the Rolling Stones, and here it is: can't get no satisfaction. You got to stop trying to be satisfied. Buddhists, I'm not a Buddhist, but they believe that the enemy of serenity is desire, wanting things. What's his name? Elon Musk. And he can buy anything he wants. He has enough money to buy anything he wants. The poorest, shabbiest Buddhist monk in tattered robes wandering the streets can do the same thing, can buy anything he wants because he doesn't want anything.
Oh, you're so brilliant. Let's go back to the Nicholson movie and talk about the script, because what is funny, you have about 120 pages in a script. And so that first scene, how many pages did that scene take for him to write? He wrote that in how many pages?
We're talking about Casablanca?
No, the Schmidt one, the Jack Nicholson movie.
Oh, how many?
Office scene. How many pages did that office scene take in a
Very good
script?
question. I've not seen the script, I've seen the movie, but I'm sure Alexander that would take less than a page.
Less than a page. Less than
Yes.
a page. That's
Well,
the essence of.
there's no dialogue in the
There's
scene, and
no.
the dialogue, of course, adds pages. It's just a description of the office and Jack sitting there, and the stuff that's important, which is the boxes that the
Ev-
walls, the stuff that I told you about, and otherwise the ticking of the clock. That's it. It turns 5 o'clock. He gets up, walks out. End of
okay,
scene.
so that's one page. That's one page.
I
And
think
what? How does?
maximum
How,
1 page, maybe less than a page.
and I would think less than a page. You could do it in less than a page. And
Hmm.
the magic is how somebody picking up a script like that, they pick up 110 or 120 page script. You read the first page and you have that scene on the first page. How does somebody get so interested that they pay money for that script?
I've said this before. There can't be anybody on the planet who's read more scripts than I have, and I had over 1,000 students in my seminar in 4 decades. In the screenwriting seminar, 8 writers each writing a screenplay. And the biggest mistake, people ask me, what's the biggest mistake the mistake that writers make? And as we write too much, everything is too long. We've been trained we get applauded by our parents and our teachers when we write a coherent sentence. And that's the right thing for our parents and our teachers to do. But we come out wanting to thump the thing against the longer it is, the better it is, the more impressive it is. But it's not true. It's the opposite is the case. There's another letter from Hemingway, a famous letter to his legendary editor in New York, Maxwell Perkins. And the letter goes on for 9 pages about this and that and the other thing. And finally, Hemingway wraps it up and he says, that's about it for now. Max, please forgive me for writing such a long letter. I did not have the time to write a short one. It takes time to do what artists have to do, which is select, choose. And that means, again, throwing away a lot of what you select and what you choose. You're trying stuff out and you're trying to see what works. That is the ticket. And time, it just takes time. And time is what our life is made up of. There's more to our lives than just time. But the measure of our life is time. And that's what you have to give to art. If you want to be a professional, you got to give your life to it. And if that sounds cynical and brooding, I mean it the opposite way. There can't be anything more splendid, more wonderful to give a life to than imagine swapping your imagination, you're selling your daydreams. It's just too good to be true. And imagine you're walking down the street and somebody comes up to you wild-eyed and shaky and says, hey, please excuse me, I'm a screenwriter. And I had this dream that I must tell you. I had this amazing dream. And let's say that you're so generous a citizen that instead of running for your life, which is what I would do, you say, oh, okay, tell me your dream. And let's say, and then what if the writer said to you, oh, thanks very much. Before we get started, though, I need to let you know that it's going to take a couple of hours. And I also need $17 or whatever it costs to go to the movies these days. I'm not sure what it is. You'd figure, well, crank up the lithium on this guy's drip. It's madness. And yet that's what we're doing. And I think it's useful for writers to remember that what we're doing is crazy. It's mad. And what we should not be doing is expecting it to flow normally and smoothly and in an orderly fashion. And we were talking before about the accounting offices. Don't expect things with agents and producers to go neatly and regularly and dependably and reasonably. It's pretty crazy. And that's the good news about it.
The wonderful thing about writing a script, when you're writing a script, when you first start off, you want to put everything in there. You want to make sure that who's ever going to read that script, especially the first few pages, you want them to see that scene. You want them to see it. And you tend to just put so much that they don't read it. They just
Right.
say,
Well,
okay,
that's the
that's it.
irony.
You,
The more language you add, it would seem that clarifies, but the opposite is the case. It's just a distraction. If you come upon, let's say there's a scene in front of a waterfall. Here's how you would describe the waterfall in a screenplay. as far as I'm concerned, the proper way to do it. And describe a waterfall in a screenplay. Ready? Here it is. Waterfall. If you go into the way the craggy granite rock face bleeds, drips with foam, and the way the prismatic light creates rainbows in the mist, the blah 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 blah. It's just like having a flashing superimposition saying amateur, amateur. That's why novels are easier. People say to me, yeah, but Richie, isn't our novels longer? Well, that's one reason they're easier. It's easier to write long. You can do descriptions in novels, but that's why movies are the most difficult, I think, of all of the formats. People think that, oh, look, movies that you just throw away and to make some money and so you can do the real art. But in fact, the most demanding of all formats might very well be the movie, the motion picture. I find it much easier I've had modest success, okay, better than modest success in screenwriting and in authoring both fiction and nonfiction. And let me tell you, the latter is easier. It's easier
Oh,
to write a book
absolutely.
than a screenplay.
And in a way, it's true in writing a book. People will often say to me, "Oh, I'm going to write a kid's book, and then in a few years I'll be able to write a novel." And I say, "No, it's the opposite way, because a really great kid's book has to be perfect. Every word, you can't mess it up." And yeah, you can write novel. You could write a 400-page novel. You just keep writing it. You have all these things, but then you say, okay, turn that into a book that a kid will read and that will be a best-selling kids book. It's so difficult.
Yes, the Dr. Seuss, it's funny, we are blessed, richly blessed with some grandchildren, including a new-ish 3.5 years old. It's not new anymore. And I'm reading to her just last week I'm reading Dr. Seuss. There's no better writer than Seuss. Those books, I read them to my own children. They're the parents of this child. And I thought they were so brilliant when I first read them. Do they hold up? Are they as good as they were when I first read them, when I read them to the grandchildren? And the answer is no, they're not as good. They're better. The great works get better and better. You listen to Bach and you learn more. You listen to the Beatles, and is it as good as you recall? No, it's even better. Again, I was talking about Casablanca. I was on. It's one of my favorite movies. I'm asked from time to time, "What's your favorite movie?" And there's nothing more boring, I think, than a college of a film professor or a retired film professor like me saying that the best movie ever made was Citizen Kane. But I do believe that. And recently I was on a plane and I saw it yet again. And was it as good? No, it's not as good as I recalled. It's even better than I recalled. And it's interesting. Ask yourself, everybody who's joining us here, what's your favorite movie? Whatever it is, I'll bet you've seen it several times. And I don't think somebody sees what they decide is their favorite movie just once. They see it over and over. I know there are people who watch the same movie Christmas time, and just think about it. Once you've seen it, you know everything that there is to know about it. Why would you care about it any more? And the irony is that you care more about it. You learn more stuff. It gets stronger and stronger. So it's not about the data that comes across. It's bigger than that. I think it's actually biological. Aristotle said there's a beginning, a middle, and an end when he was talking to about the playwriting way back then, 2,500 years ago. And if you look at stories, the beginning, they're not the same size, those three parts. The beginning is usually pretty short. The big part is the middle, and the smallest part is the end. And what does that look like? Isn't that a model of a human life? The childhood, and then what is called grown up or adulthood, and then a quick ending. Raise your hands high if you're hoping to be on resuscitators and IV catheters and all of that stuff. The ideal romanticized death is quick. She died in her sleep overnight. And that's why I think that every story, every movie is really a model of a human life. Whose life? Who else is the author, the writer who wrote the thing? So everything is really autobiographical. And it's like, I used to think that the movie screen was like a window. You sit in the dark and you look through that window into the lives of these other people, the people in the movie. But more about later on, I realized no, it's not a window. It's glass like a. It's not a mirror. It's glass like a mirror, but it's a window. It's not a mirror. It's a window. You're looking through. I'm sorry, it's not a window. It's a mirror. You're looking actually not into other people's lives, but into your own. You're looking at a mirror and seeing a reflection of your own self. And I think to some extent, we're trying to make sure that we're really here. When I was living in New York, I used to go to travel on the subway, and there are along the beams in each station, there are little candy machines and so on, and each one has a mirror on it. And you'll see people walk along and look in the mirror at themselves. Then they get up to the next one and they look again, and then again and again. What's going on here? I think we're trying to figure out if we're really here. Didn't we? Everybody has had a dream that we woke up from that we thought was real. Usually it's a bad dream, and we wake up and we're glad to realize, oh, thank goodness, that's just a dream. But we really thought it was happening when we were dreaming it. How do we know this ain't a dream? Look at me. I got a book. The book you just showed me is about to be published in Russia. I'm from Long Island City, Queens. How do I have? I also have, as I bragged earlier before we got started, there's a Deadpan, my new novel, which is from Heresy Press, which is an imprint of Skyhorse, a big New York publisher. It's coming out this summer again in Ireland. That just doesn't seem real to me. What if I wake up from this and I discover I'm really a jackrabbit in Nebraska? If this isn't real, why do I have to put up with what I put up with? Why stop at the red lights? Why pay taxes? Why not seize anybody who looks good in the street and crush her to me? And so we're trying to figure out, I think, what's real and what is not. And I think that movies play a big role in that.
I'm not surprised that people are reading your both Deadpan and, of course, the essentials of screenwriting all over the world, because people have known for years that you are really the master of the screenplay. You have created and helped so many authors become authors who will talk about writing screenplays to be really great. And there is a idea that you have this UCLA, I don't know, like a philosophy of how to write a successful screenplay.
Yes, one of our key rules. We only really had a handful of rules. The most fundamental rule is just three words. You can do anything you want, but don't be boring. That's a tall order. It may seem simple, but that's a tall order not to be boring for a couple of hours. That's really the challenge that faces everybody. But I used to believe, I've gone through a number of phases in my life. I used to think that a work of art, like a screenplay, it's got this distance. You have to put things into it, the characters and what they do and what they say, the scenes, the settings, all of the stuff that goes on the screen. And then I realized years later that no, the stuff's already there. What's happening is you're finding stuff that's already there. I've never known a writer who did not have the experience repeatedly of having a character apparently say something on their own, an event happen, an action taken without any planning that really surprised the writer herself. So I thought it's not about creating things, but about taking things away, not putting things up, but taking them down, taking them away so that you can find the story that's already there. And now I've come to phase 3, which is to get out of your own way, get into the stream of things, and let the story find you. You got to be open to the surprises. I am a trained actor and I'm an experienced public speaker, and I can say I can say things very convincingly that I don't even believe. And I'm going to say one now about writing. But please remember, I do not believe what I'm about to say, even though I've just said that. You're going to think, yeah, when I say it, you're going to nod your head, partly because of the way I say it, and partly because it does make great sense. Remember, this is a lie. And here it is. If you want to succeed in something that's competitive, and what's more competitive than writing for the screen and Hollywood and entertainment, you have to focus. You can't be given over to distractions. Now, doesn't that make good sense? And people listening to that,
Yeah.
they nod their heads. It's nonsense. The best bet is actually to stumble around dumb and stupidly. And when you bump into things that you really like, grab onto them, hold onto them in your screen narrative and in your life narrative. The people that I know who are successful and happy with their success are also surprised by what they're doing. A kid like me who grew up in New York, the thing to me was a doctor. And so I have a lot of friends who are doctors, and many of them are really quite happy. Medicine, they're getting well paid, they're doing healing work, they're respected, and so on. And no small number of them are really pleased with that, but many are not. This one wishes he was an oceanographer, and that one wishes he was an anthropologist, and they all seem to wish that they were also writers. The by setting your goals so laser sharp, you miss out on the opportunities for fun, for adventure, for creativity. We had in our screenwriting program medical doctors who were just didn't want to, they were not enjoying, they did not feel fulfilled. We had the president of a university in our class again in our master's program writing screenplays. You gotta again stop playing it safe and invite the danger, enjoy the danger. Today, unfortunately, it seems to me there's a premium on comfort. And students in classrooms should always feel comfortable. I regarded it as my obligation as an instructor to make people uncomfortable, to provoke them into thinking for themselves. And I was teaching, what was I teaching? Screenwriting. The last thing you want of your audience is for them to be comfortable. When I'm comfortable in a movie, here's my reaction. Yeah, I just nod, I nod out. My wife and I have an agreement, which is she's not allowed to poke me, to wake me, unless I'm snoring loudly and spraying people with saliva as I snooze. But it's not her obligation to wake me. It's not my obligation to be awake. It is the movie's obligation not to keep me awake by giving me something that makes me curious and makes me want to know more. That's the trick. I can tell you that when I read a screenplay, if I read the first few lines at the first of the top of the first page, and I want to move forward down that page, want to, it's, and if I get to the bottom of that page and I actually want to turn the page, it's rare. It's rare. But that's the trick.
That's
You
the
know,
nature of writing a screenplay. That's what it entails, this keeping, getting somebody interested in the first place and then keeping
any
them interested.
any story, any kind of story, whatever the format. Yes, Deadpan opens. Deadpan's a funny story. My novel Deadpan, and I'd love to see it as a movie. It's set in the early '70s, and It's a funny story about an unfunny subject: hate speech, bigotry, anti-Semitism in particular. I wish it weren't so timely. But the opening is, and it's a story about a vaguely anti-Semitic Buick dealer, a Midwest auto dealer who was magically transformed into a Jew, and not just any Jew, but the world's most popular comedian. And the very opening sentence is, he switched off the lights, but they continued burning brightly. I think that would make you want to, what's this all about? And as it unfolds, you realize that he's suddenly awakening he's finding himself backstage at a Las Vegas showroom, and now he's being marched onto the stage, and everybody's cheering him, and they have another name for him. And as he tries to explain who he is, they all speak it along with him. They all know this routine. It's this guy is the most popular comedian in the world whose signature routine is to tell what he believes is the truth about who he really is, and nobody believes it. So once again, we get into issues of evolution of moving characters. You just don't set up a character and it's the same way. Cher, at the beginning of Moonstruck, we talked about it. She believes that love is bunk. And at the end, as we said, she thinks that love is all there is. That's a different Cher from the Cher at the beginning of the Loretta is the name of her character. So characters need to evolve and grow, both again on the screen and in novels, and also in that thing we call real life, if we
Real
really know
life.
what it is. That's why I
Yeah,
worry about so many people being held responsible for remarks they made 40 years ago. That was then, and they're different people now. They're
and
literally
this is
physically,
now. Yeah.
you know.
Now, you mentioned in your book, of course, some very important Hollywood people, but one of them that you mentioned is Nora Ephron. And Nora, now, when I was the only really person I met in Hollywood was Nora Ephron, the one that I was impressed with. I met other people, but not, of course, I was impressed with her because really of her parents, because they were incredible. They were a team of script writers in the Hollywood, the perfect time in Hollywood. And their scripts, I can still watch Desk Set today. I just love that film. And the dialogue is so sharp, it moves so nicely. So what for you, as you're the guru of screenplays, what do you think of the evolution here of the script over the years? What, looking back all the way to the 30s to now, what do you see as the major changes?
What there's a major change that I hope is not a major change, that I'm just not seeing it right, and it worries me. And that is, if I can, there's a parallel in music. In music, a musical composition has various elements. It's got rhythm and instrumentation and so on. But it's the main thing, the most important thing has been melody. And now I'm hearing music that's very melodic. I'm a musical guy. My son's a musician. My dad was a very well known musician for many years. And I hear these tunes and I can't sing them back. And I think the people, just songwriters, musicians, composers, have gotten weary of the of melody, and they're now getting into the leading with percussion. And in rap and in hip hop, it lyric is really important, very near it, the center, if not at the center. And in movies, I'm seeing the death of narrative. Stories, they seem to just drift and drift. Aristotle, we talked about Aristotle. He says the beginning, middle, and the end. The beginning, he says, is the part before which you need nothing. And the end is the part after which you need nothing. And I like to take a long silence when I'm lecturing about that, because I'm waiting for somebody to say, and it's never happened, what use is that? The beginning, well, everybody knows that the beginning is the part before which is that there's nothing, and the end is the part after which. And yet, if you look at a lot of movies, they don't start at the beginning, they start before the beginning. Even parts of movies, scenes, have beginnings, middles, and ends. Even just parts of parts, like a line of dialogue, it has a beginning, middle, and an end. If your line of dialogue, if your character is saying something, I've been thinking about this, and that all of that is before the beginning. You got to get to the point. People say to me, yeah, but that's the way people really talk, with a lot of ums and ers and vocalized pauses like that and so on. That's the way people really talk.
But I don't
Well,
want to pay for it.
is it the way people really talk? It is. And so what's wrong with that? Two things are wrong with that. One is that you don't need to, as you just said, you don't need to go to the movie theater to hear that.
Exactly.
You don't need to hire a babysitter and park the car and pay for tickets and so on to hear the way people really speak. I took a walk this morning and I had a conversation with a neighbor I ran into, and it went something like this: "Hey, how you doing, boy? You think it's going to rain? That was something with the blood. How's everything doing with the? Did they go to the blood? It's sweetly dull. It's boring. That's the second problem with the
Yes.
way people really speak. It's boring.
It's
So
terrible. It's
you
terrible.
yes,
I watched a very high budget film during the cold weather here in Austin. We had snow on the ground for 3 days and ice for 3 days. And so and because I had to cancel all my interviews and all of that other stuff, I had a lot of time to watch film. So I was watching. So I watched this one very high budget film. And in the first 15 minutes, they use the F word all the time, every other line. And I'm thinking, my goodness, when I was in Hollywood, I suffered over every line I wrote. I worried over every line. I went back and forth over every line, trying to see how to make it move, how to make it move to the next line, and that the next line would work. And I struggled. And now, if all I had to do was write the F word, whoa, I could maybe I.
I'm a hardliner on civil liberties, and I think people should have the right to write badly, which is the way they write. Here is my Sopranos hat. There it is. I'm only showing you because I'm one of those people who believes that The Sopranos is one of the greatest achievements in the history of civilization. And there's a lot of use in The Sopranos of foul language, the C word, and certainly the F word. But it's
Hey,
in one battle after another, a movie that must tell you, there are people I know and love and respect who claim to really love that movie. I thought it was just idiotic. And I was especially offended by the FFFFFFFC, FFFFC, CCCF. Last year, the winning picture was Anora. And again, she's clearly ad-libbing, FFFFFFF. Everything is, it's like as if they get $5 every time they say it. Again, what's wrong with it? It's self-conscious. And self-consciousness is the enemy of all creative expression. If as soon as you know what you're doing, you're lost.
yeah, these films are not going to hold up. They spend an enormous amount of money on them, and unfortunately, the public is accepting it too easily. The public has to fight back and say, "This is stupid." I don't care
Yeah.
how famous the actor is. I don't care if it's stupid, if it's just one F word, one dirty word, and one just easy, nothing dialogue. People have to get more, they have to become connoisseurs of film. They have to know that, yes, Casablanca holds up because it's so beautiful. We look at some of these films through the time and we say, whoa, the dialogue is so great. We can watch it again over and over. Who is going to watch these films over and over? And they cheapen our minds too. They're not good for our minds. Whereas when we, if you go back and even just a simple movie like Funny Face, if you listen to it again and you listen to the dialogue, it just moves. Boy, one scene after another, they're going all over Paris, and every line is just so appropriate, and every line is so beautiful, and there's not one dirty word in that whole movie.
Yeah, they have to have a battle to just say damn at the end of Gone with the Wind. And I'm glad we don't have to have those battles anymore. But look, most art really isn't very good. I was at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York a few months ago, and I didn't see one painting, I didn't see one work of sculpture that wasn't timeless and eternal and didn't deserve its place there. And we get the impression that that the sculpture and graphic art paintings, oil paintings, are all beautiful and wonderful. We don't realize that for every one of those paintings, there's 8,000 stupid, worthless, useless, amateurish paintings. Now, God bless the people who painted them. Amateur means lover. They did it for love instead of for money. But we think that film is uniquely poor because it's contemporary. There hasn't been the dropping away of bad stuff. You look back at the ancient Greek plays, the ancient Greek theater, you look back at Elizabethan Shakespearean times, and all of the plays are good. There were bad plays back then, they just fell away. And I think what you're saying is absolutely true. I think that Anora will be forgotten about. I think that one battle after another will be forgotten about. I think Sinners will be forgotten about. I think we show that we are markers for being elite and educated and cultured and literate by claiming to like certain movies, even though I think deep in our bones we don't
Yeah,
like
we're
them.
so
I'll tell
many
you
people
real
are
quick.
listening to what the publicity is, or the critics are saying, you should like this. You should like this music. We're giving you this music that has no melody whatsoever, that Dean Martin couldn't sing it. If Dean Martin couldn't sing it, I don't want to hear it. Can you imagine
In
giving some of these songs to Frank Sinatra or Judy Garland and say, sing it?
I, I can imagine it, and it's not a pretty thing to imagine. It's funny, I was asked as the 90s were concluding, as we were getting towards the new millennium, it must have been a slow news day because I got a phone call from a reporter who was writing an article. He said he wanted to know what I thought was the best picture of the 90s. I'm not a film buff. I don't see every single movie. So I was trying to think, what have I seen that I liked? And then I thought of a few movies, but were they in the 90s? And then I had an insight, which is that in this vast universe, and the theoretical mathematicians and astrophysicists tell us this is just one universe that is, and there are infinite other universes, all of them each, in all of that vastness, there's not one thing that is less important than what I think is the best movie in the 90s. So I just blurted it out. I said, Terminator 2. And I said Terminator 2 for a couple of reasons. One was I wanted to shock them a little bit. They're expecting me to name some Bulgarian filmic tone poem. They're not expecting a big Hollywood blockbuster or the second chapter in a franchise. And so I wanted to surprise them. But another reason I chose Terminator 2 is it's a great movie. Have you ever seen it? It is
Oh
spectacular.
yeah.
And it has a lot to say about the nature of the human condition. At the end of the movie, what happens to Arnold, what happens to Terminator? He becomes human. And how does, what is it that shows us that as humans that he can feel as a robot, as a Terminator? You can't feel anything. And suddenly he is able to feel. And he's able to feel not just good, but bad. And I think people watching that movie, even though they don't calculate this consciously, later on in their lives, when they feel bad, they'll have already had the experience of feeling bad in the movie in a simulated circumstance. They got through that. They'll get through this. It's a rehearsal for the bad stuff that life will inevitably, unavoidably throw at everybody. One, again, I said it earlier, there's this notion that a really good film is a personal thing that says something about the truth of the matter, and a bad film is a film that lots of audiences like, and that's really popular in that way, and that's very entertaining and engaging and a lot of fun. That somehow is a lower form. And I can tell you, the organizing principle at UCLA, besides don't be boring, was audiences are not stupid; they're smart. They have a way of finding the good stuff. I'm not saying every popular movie is good and that every unpopular movie is bad. But if you look back to the ancient Greek theater, you look back to Shakespeare, those plays that survived are classics of art, literature, and they're also successful box office. None of them is an obscure little lost poetic exercise. They are bloodlust and terror. Oedipus kills his father. We all know what he does to his mother. Medea murders her own children in a jealous rage against their faithless father, the philandering Jason. Macbeth ends with he kills his king, who's a guest in his house, and there's no noble purpose in it. He just wants to be the king. The witches told him he could be king. That's what he's got to get rid of the king. Hamlet ends with 9 corpses on stage. We've counted them up in class. Some of them have been run through on swords. Others have been poisoned. Nobody wants to see the village of the happy, nice people. This was not invented by 11 Jews in a dark room at Paramount Pictures 2 weeks ago, last Thursday. It's the natural biological entity that is narrative. And again, it's a model of an idealized, romanticized human life.
Of course, there are lots of different types of films and lots of ones that touch your heart that don't involve killing, maybe accidental, but we'll get to that too. I just want to mention, because this book, one of the words in it, and this is important, the art, craft, because it is a craft, and business. And I remember when I first read it, that's just when I was involved in Hollywood, and the business side of Hollywood is so crazy. And people who like dream of writing a script have no idea of what happens in Hollywood. And of course, the power lunch is the thing. And I remember when I first went, my very first trip, I had already made contact. I had already had some things going on, and I was meeting at CAA, And of course, I was coming all Hollywood. I don't know, those dreams you have. And I spent a lot of money on a beautiful suit, a deep, sort of dusty rose suit. And it was more expensive than I had spent in years. When I was younger, I had lots of money and I could buy stuff. But at that point in my life, I wasn't rich and I spent a lot of money. And I had this beautiful suit. I didn't want to wear black. I thought that's too businessy. I didn't want to wear gray. I thought that's too depressing. So this dusty rose, I thought just red would be like, no, that's too much. So I go into CAA. I'm wearing this suit. My shoes aren't as expensive, but the suit is really expensive. And I'm ushered in to an agent, one of those Hollywood agents who wears Gucci shoes with no socks. What I considered very shabby, sloppy jeans, and I don't know, a shirt that's sort of open, unbuttoned, trying to look very sexy. Although in his whole life, this man is never going to look sexy. But the whole outfit, I'm sure he was wearing like $1,000, and we're not talking his watch and everything else. And he looks at me, and I realize, oh my God, if I would have worn my jeans and a dirty old shirt, just a big one of my floppy, nice shirts, he would have liked me much more. Because the minute I walked in with that suit, I realized he thought, and I think the girl who walked me in thought the same thing. Oh no, she's trying too hard. And there was like,
Yeah, well,
forget it.
my sister, my late sister, Mr. Everyday, Jessica, was a well-known actor,
Oh yeah, she
and
was great. She's brilliant.
she used to say she would advise younger actors if they were going for a meeting. Sometimes they would want to dress, if they were going for an audition, they would sometimes want to dress, look like the character. And she said, no, just be comfortable. Wear something that really makes you feel comfortable. That's the thing. That's the thing to do. And that's what really pays off. Trying to figure it all out and intellectualize about it won't work. Intellect and reason have very important places in our lives. But art is not that place. Movies is not that place. Art is the place to go crazy and reckless and dangerous. It's life that you want to be boring. Imagine I pick somebody up from the airport and you say, so how was the flight? And what they wanted to be is boring. It took off on time. It landed on time. There was no turbulence or no engines caught fire. It didn't. Imagine you say to somebody, so how was your flight? They say, oh, it was terrific. We blew a tire leaving Kennedy, and then one engine flamed out over Nebraska. And then there was turbulence over Nevada, and one of the service people was badly injured. And then when we landed in LA, it slid off the runway, and it was terrific. You wouldn't want that in your real life. In your life, you want boredom and predictability, and in art, you want the opposite of that.
What was your favorite restaurant for power lunches? I don't know.
Well,
What's
I
your
think
favorite? Spago?
I believe the power lunch is overrated among writers. Writers and the kind of lunches that I would go to were always held at the what probably was not very well known, the Glen Deli. It's up at the top of Beverly Glen, and it's just a Jewish deli. And I would always see, rest his soul, Brian Wilson there, and I would see people, recognizable stars, out in front, sitting and dining. I think the restaurants are important for agents and producers and the movie executives and so on. But writers, every single professional writer, there's a saying by Oscar Wilde. He says that amateurs talk about art, artists talk about money. But every artist, every professional artist, is an independent entrepreneur, a business person. And every business has something called inventory. And what writers have that nobody else has, not in the movie business or anywhere else, is the ability to create out of their own head inventory. And that's what they should be doing instead of having lunch. They should be writing and having an answer to the question, what else have you got? Also, stuff pays off in ways that you never imagined. The very first script I wrote It was well liked, but never sold. But it got me a staff assignment at Universal with a ridiculously generous salary, a parking place with my name on it next to Paul Newman's, I noted, and my name on the door of an office with a lot of at Universal. I think I might have mentioned once a writer that I worked in my class. At the first meeting, with 8 writers around the table, everybody discusses briefly what they're going to write, the screenplay they're going to write that quarter, that academic quarter. And I said to the group, this was like in the early 80s, that the hot picture now is Beverly Hills Cop. Everybody's looking for Beverly Hills Cop. That's the smartest thing to do. The agents want that, the studios want that. Smartest thing to do is to write an action adventure, a melodramatic cop buddy drama, I said. Therefore, don't do it. It'll be one of 600 movies that are screenplays that are out there just like that. You don't be smart, be stupid. The stupidest thing you can do right now is write a Western. Nobody's making Westerns. Write a Western. So somebody in the class wrote a Western. It was a very funny Western. I sent it to a friend of mine, Andy Bergman, who wrote Blazing Saddles. His company acquired the script. They optioned it for very little money, and they showed it around town, and they didn't make a deal, and they let the thing go. But the writer got the money for that, and he kept the money, and he had kept the rights to the script. But he also was suddenly known instead of unknown. He'd been shown around Hollywood under the best of circumstances, not by himself. They wouldn't have read him. Not by his agent. He didn't have an agent, but even if he had an agent, it's not as good as being shown around by producers with a track record for making hit movies and want to make your movie. So he was read not by underlings, but by the chiefs of the studios. There's nothing wrong with being read by underlings, by the way, but also nothing wrong with being read by the chiefs. And at one studio, Fox, they said, we don't want to make this movie, but we love your voice and we think you'd be right. We have a problem script, but we've not been able to get an A-list Hollywood writer to get a handle on it. And we thought maybe you should take a crack at it. And I remember telling him, don't tell them how much you like the script until you read it. You know, I mean, he's like, no, I don't want to do this job. And it launched that also. Suddenly there's a major studio wants to make a deal with him for a rewrite assignment. So he could pick and choose among agents. And so he's had a long career now going on, getting 40 years because he did a stupid thing. He wrote a Western. So I see writers outsmart themselves just about every day, trying to figure out what will go. Whatever the trend is today, it's too late to get in on that trend because it is the trend. It had to have been in the works a few years ago. Forget about all of that stuff and just go crazy with your imagination, and don't expect always to be pleased and satisfied. It's a privilege. I have often said it's a privilege even merely to be mistreated in Hollywood. The worst thing Hollywood will do to you is put you on ignore. As awful as it is to hear somebody say, we don't like the script, it's just not for us, we pass. No. As painful as that might be, it's not as painful as what you usually hear, which is this. Just a gaping, yawning, empty silence. That is the worst sound.
That's the death. That's death.
That's most common.
Now, of course, I'm going to be celebrating the 11th anniversary of my radio program, Joy on Paper.
Congratulations.
On 11 years, and it's going to be on St. Patrick's Day. And over the years of more than 2,000 interviews, I've spoken to a lot of authors, many of them who have, of course, wonderful books that they think are perfect for the movies, and quite a number of them who are writing a script for it, or I would say more like trying to write a script for it, because I'm not sure how many authors are actually successful, and then to try to sell their book as a spec script is a daunting process.
Yeah, I go the other way, actually. I've had modest success, more than just immodest success, writing a screenplay and then not showing it, but using it as an outline for a novel.
Exactly.
And most of the heavy lifting has been done. I'm not going to say it's easy. The story is there, the characters are there, much of the dialogue is there. It's an elaborate outline for a novel. Also, there's a great reluctance, unfortunately, in Hollywood to do original screenplays. Everything has to be based on some other intellectual property, IP, as
I
they say.
know.
So why not? I've had experiences where I could not sell a screenplay. My first novel, I wrote as a screenplay, couldn't sell it, wrote it, use it as an outline for a novel, sold the novel, and then once it was a novel, I sold the screenplay. People were suddenly interested because it had been published by a big publisher and it had been validated in that sense. I think every movie starts with executives trying to cover their asses, protect themselves from what they anticipate is going to be the failure of the movie. It wasn't my fault. We had Tom Cruise in the movie. It was directed by so and so on. And that seems to me a self-defeating proposition.
Yep.
You just have to let go. And as I'm going to say it again, in your dramatic narrative and in your life narrative, stay open to the surprises.
One of the things that, like, I was very lucky to sell 3 spec scripts. They're original. I absolutely, the idea is original. So that was that was a coup when I look back on it. At the time, I was really miserable, but I was happy that at least I got the deal and they appeared in the Hollywood Reporter. And my father was still alive and he got to see it. So he was very proud of me. And so he's in heaven thinking, oh, it's still turning around, but at least he got to show it to all the neighbors. And so he was very proud. But it was a challenge when I was hired because of the spec scripts and people seeing it. I was hired to adapt 2 books. Now, that is when the books are not, I don't know even if the books are great, but if the books aren't really great, that is a challenge.
Yes, yes. I also think the screenplays, when they don't sell right away, they sometimes sell down the line. Melvin Van Peebles wrote in, what was it, a Clint Eastwood movie, Unforgiven, I think. And it was a one best picture, best screenplay. He wrote that 20 years earlier. He was packing up his car to go back to New Hampshire or something when Malpaso, that's Clint's company, called and wanted to buy the thing. It ain't over till it's over. And with art, it's never really over. And that is sometimes frustrating, but it's also an asset. It's also a blessing for.
Adapt a book. Did you ever turn somebody's book into a screenplay?
Yes, I have written adaptations. I have been hired to do that, and I've done my own work. I've adapted some of my own stuff. It's very creative, to be sure, but I think it's a very serious mistake for to adapt a novel that they don't have the rights to. The
Yeah, no, unless you're hired to do it, don't do it. I mean, unless you have a deal and you have a contract and you're going to get paid, do not do it. Do not just say, "Oh, well, it's a great book. I'll write the script for it and try to sell it." That doesn't work.
they won't even read the
They
script
won't
because
touch
they'll
it.
be if they make the movie, then they're afraid you'll sue them that you really use
Oh
their
yeah,
script.
no,
It's going to be similar.
no.
Mistake.
Oh
Uh,
yeah, never ever do that. Never ever do something like that. That has to be only if you're hired to do it. And like on one of the scripts I did, I was like the third person hired to do it, and they didn't actually show me the first 2 versions. So 2 other writers had done this book, and but they didn't show it to me. They wanted a new perspective, and I did, but it was actually based on an autobiography of somebody, and actually I did some more research, I think, than the other script writers. And what I did is I actually didn't like the main character, the guy. I loved the wife, and in my script I gave her the best part. And I think later on I saw the other scripts. My script was so much better, but I don't think the guy liked it because I oofed her up and she stole the thing.
my teacher back at in the golden era at USC Film School, Erwin R. Blacker, long deceased, he would say, imagine that you're adapting material from another medium, say a novel, to the screen. You're writing a screenplay based, let's say, on a novel. What do you owe the original material of the novel? And before you answer, he said, I want to hear everybody answer at the same time, and it's just one word. What do you owe the original material? The answer is thing. What
Thing.
you owe is an audience, the best movie that you can provide. And the hell with the book. They say, oh, they ruined the novel. Hey, the novel is still there. The words don't rearrange themselves on the page. What they mean is that you just made a bad movie, if that happens to be the case. But you should take liberties and do whatever you think will work best in a movie theater. With a book, you have time to put it down, pick it up, read some parts carefully, other parts. The viewer, the observer, the audience of a book has more control over the art that she's seeing compared to somebody sitting in a movie theater watching a movie. Here it comes, get out of the way, here it is.
It's just wonderful to talk to you. You are, as I said, you're so brilliant. I've carried
Oh,
you
thank you.
around the world. You've been around the world with me because I've kept it with me when I was working on things. So it's just wonderful. This is such a treat for me to be able to talk to you, to help
Thank
promote
you.
this book and to help promote Deadpan, which I also love so much. And I think you're
Thank
right.
you.
It would
Thank
make a
you.
great film. It will be wonderful. So we have to get
Thank
that
you.
going. You are a real joy. And I hope everyone, if you read what this one, this is now a collector's item, I think, because I think it's the first, like it came out, the day it came out, I think I got it. So,
I'll tell you just a quick story about that book, which is that it was my major exhibit when I came up for tenure at UCLA. And UCLA is a research institution. This means that teaching is the second most important priority. The most important priority is research in the sciences, scholarship in the humanities, and in the arts. My corner is what they call creative activity. And the book looked too much like to this committee beyond the film school. The book looked too much like a how-to. And however good it might have been, they said it's really a teaching tool. It's not original green theory or something like that. And I defended the book by saying to them that I truly appreciated their comments. That was a lie. I didn't really appreciate it at all. I said, but I wanted them to know that in a discipline like screenwriting, it's impossible to write to write about original theoretical considerations and stuff like that without also integrating certain practical uses. But I wanted to reassure the committee that it had never been my intention that anybody should learn anything from the book. And here I am, I retired from tenure after 40 years. So it's crazy. The university scene, not only these days, but even especially these days, it seems from what I read, I think I hit the sweet spot both in academia and in life. These are dark days. I find myself being glad to be old, but I worry. I have children and grandchildren, and I do worry about what's in store for them. There are some very basic notions here that are being
yes,
overturned.
yeah, but still, when people who love film, you don't have to watch all the new stuff. Go back and watch some of the old films. I still, How Green Was My Valley. You watch that and you feel better. You feel better, right?
Yeah, and
And
if you don't feel better, that's okay too. If you see people coming out of a movie theater, let's say you're just walking through the mall and suddenly the doors open at the movie theater and people stream out and they're all sobbing, they're all weird, crying, and you'd say to yourself, "Boy, that's a sad movie." They're all weeping and sobbing. Would you say to yourself, "I sure don't want to see that"? No, you would get in
I
line
want
with
to
them
see
and
it.
there to see the movie if it could move you if it could move that many people so palpably, so measurably. Again, it's a safe place. It's a simulator where they simulate circumstances. But remember, the feelings are completely real. When you're sad in a movie, you're really sad. When you're frightened in a movie, you're really frightened. When you're angry, you're really angry. And that's what it's all about. It's about making people feel. I once was talking to an evangelical Christian conference, 500 pastors gathered in Chicago for the weekend. Why was I there? Why was I invited? Because they were studying, the conference was all about narrative in scripture. Most of the Bible, what Jews call Torah, what Christians call the Old Testament, what Muslims call the Hebrew Bible, and also the Muslim Bible, which is Quran, and the Christian Bible, which is the New Testament. There's advice, consideration, there are principles. Mainly, though, there's just stories, and they're very upsetting. Are they reassuring, comforting stories? They are not. The first story in Scripture is that of Lot, an old man whose daughters decide to get him drunk so that they can have sex with him, one on one night and one on the other night, and try to conceive a child with their father. This isn't the National Enquirer. This is Holy Scripture that's held sacred by billions of people all around the world. You don't have to be uplifting. I said to the preachers, you do not, if you want to keep people in the theater, in the church on Sunday morning, even after they leave the church, by which I mean, if you want them to be hefting and thinking about your sermon, if it was a good sermon, and if it was a really good sermon, what about through the week? They think about Pastor Jones' sermon, what he said in church on Sunday. You do not have to make them feel good. You just have to make them feel. And it has to be a passionate feeling. You can enrage them. You can cause them grief and sorrow. Just as long as they feel something passionate, that's all you got to do. And of course, that's plenty to do.
Exactly. I realized, looking at the title again, we never got to television writing, which is also a special talent. So perhaps you would come back for another
I'd
interview.
love to.
How about that?
I don't mind a bit being praised so generously and lavishly by you. I'll come back anytime. I'm ready tomorrow. Just tell me when, PatZi.
Okay, I think next time we'll talk about television writing. And also, I will ask all my viewers if you have special questions for Richard Walter, the genius behind script writing, the guru who knows it all. Send me the questions and I will add those to the next interview we have, okay? Because I have to see you more. I missed you when I didn't see you, and so I'm going to have you back soon, okay?
I'd love to answer questions from your viewers. That'd be a joy for me to do.
Okay, I'll do that. Okay.
Thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Okay, it's been a joy to talk to you. You are a joy.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank you.
so
You too.
much.
Back at you. Back at you.
Oh, wait, just one thing. Just one thing. Just your website. It's Richard Walter
Yeah.
Books, right?
RichardWalterBooks.com. If you just go to RichardWalter.com, it'll work for you.
Yeah.
It'll lead you there.
It'll pop up because there's
Yeah.
one and only Richard Walter, the
Thank
genius.
you.
Okay?
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you again. Bye-bye.
Take care now.
Okay,
Bye-bye.
bye now. Bye.